Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Friends, it has been another incredibly busy week, in an incredibly busy month, in an incredibly busy year for me here in Wilk's World. And one thing I am incredibly grateful for is the fact that I've had so many incredible guests here on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. In the coming weeks and months, I do have an incredible lineup of very inspirational guests to bring you here on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. But this week I did not have one, so I am pulling up one of my favorite conversations from the DTH archives, and that's my first conversation with Angel Eduardo, way back from episode 74. Angel and I had such a great conversation talking about having your of color card revoked for not having the right ideas. People using the phrase and racializing people as white as a pejorative, and so much more in that phenomenal conversation. Calling Angel a friend is such a blessing to me because of all the great work that he continues to do with his writing and his work on the Fair Perspectives podcast found on FAIR's website, fairforall.org. You can find all that information in the show notes, but do not miss this phenomenal conversation with me and my friend, Angel Eduardo. Here we go. Angel Eduardo, thank you for joining the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, so good. I recently became familiar with you. I saw an article that you wrote in Newsweek, I believe, right? Called Stop Calling Me White for Having the Wrong Opinions.
Yep.
And it just, the title obviously stood out to me greatly. So I read that, and why don't you talk a little bit about, the inspiration for that article, because you talk about being called white as a pejorative for not having the right opinion. So go ahead and talk about the inspiration for that. Where'd that come from?
Well, kind of two different places at once. So the first thing is just, my personal experience and the experience of many people that I know and have spoken to, of this sort of thing being a thing growing up. If you are a quote unquote person of color, you may encounter this. It's something that, people have talked about, everyone from Barack Obama to John McWhorter to Coleman Hughes to, Thomas Chatterton Williams, all these people. I've heard it from many, many people there, and also from my own peers and family members, my siblings. Like this has happened to many people. It's the sort of thing of, you're growing up, you're trying to figure yourself out, you're trying to have an identity, and there are all these different options for how to do that, right? And there are all these different ways people try to do that. And there are easier and more difficult ways. Mm-hmm. You can become a skater, and, you know what to wear, what to do, what music to listen to, who to like and who not to like. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, defining yourself in the kind of negative space of all the things that you're not and all the things that you hate, right? Mm-hmm. So, hating the Backstreet Boys or whatever, that is part of your identity, because the negation of that kind of creates something in the negative space.
Right.
So it's similar to that, I think. And it's something that I experienced, as you can hear, I have a particular way of speaking that doesn't necessarily jibe with, a kind of the hip hop sort of vernacular, the way of that, that lilt. of that sort of cultural kind of affect. The way people sometimes come up speaking, sometimes people affect this sort of speech. I never did.
Mm-hmm.
So I stood out among, some of my peer groups
Yep.
for that. And it was a particular time as well. It was the late 90s, early 2000s.
I believe in the article you talk about, your parents were immigrants, you were a first generation American and had that first generation experience,
Yeah.
but you were obviously a person of color, but
Mm,
you were listening to bands like Led Zeppelin and Queen,
right.
and preferred that over like the Puff Daddy and the hip hop scene. So,
Right.
I suppose as a child, or especially an impressionable teen at that point, you're really standing out.
Yeah. I'm not really listening to what's on the radio. I'm not enjoying it. It's not my thing. I can't connect with it. I can't relate to it. And so that sets me apart. The way that I speak sets me apart. The way that I dressed set me apart. My parents weren't about to buy me some of those things, the certain clothes, and I didn't even have the sensibility to want them until a little bit later on when I'm trying to fit in, right? So I was this kind of square peg in multiple ways.
Hmm.
And a lot of the feedback that I would get there at that time for these sorts of things, my sense of humor, my taste in music, the way that I spoke, the fact that I loved reading, and like I was into certain kinds of movies and certain sorts of TV shows and things like that. And a lot of those things, a lot of those proclivities, a lot of those sensibilities were called white.
Right,
Um, and it was intended to be a pejorative, like you can tell that that's not a cool thing, right?
right,
They may
right.
as well have said like that's lame or uncool or however you want to say it, right?
Sure, sure.
They called it white, and it was just another way of saying not cool.
Right.
But it had the added effect, not necessarily intended on their part,
Hmm.
but it had the added effect of kind of excising me from this in group, right? Even if the in group was based on immutable characteristics, like we're all black and brown, quote unquote, and we all are first generation American, and we all are Spanish speaking, right? So we have all these things in common. And in the scramble to feel included and to have an identity and to have a sense of belonging, my kind of instinct was, I couldn't have articulated this at the time, but my instinct was, you have to accept me. Like we're the same, like I'm Dominican, you're Puerto Rican, you're Cuban. Like we're all like we're all this group. So you have to
Sure,
let me in, right? Because I had the experience before that and throughout my school experience of not being let in by anybody.
sure.
And so I, kind of went to like that I ended up defaulting at to that point of, well, these guys can't possibly reject me, right? Because I share these traits. But, of course they could, because that's not all it takes, right? Like, yeah, we have those things as people that were not in common, and they were enough of a departure, these characteristics that I had. They were
Sure,
enough of a departure that it didn't work, right?
sure.
And those things were called white. So fast forward to present day, the other kind of impetus for this is that same sort of gatekeeping, like an in-group sort of gatekeeping, is going
Hmm.
on, but it's much more intentional, and it's much more kind of pointed at thought crime, so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah. And there's a lot more hostility now towards it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think back to my teen years when starting with like Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and stuff,
Mm.
in the early years when they would make fun of white people back before everybody became offended by everything, and it wasn't necessarily a pejorative at that point, but it was part of their shtick. It was part of their routine.
Yeah.
Make fun of, talk the way that white people talk and walk the way that white people walk and everything else. And it was funny. I mean, it was all done in good humor and everything was
Sure.
cool. But now today, to your point, the thing to do now, apparently is being white, a white male Christian, I think is one of the worst things now you can be labeled as. Well, conservative white male Christian, I think is
Agreed.
one of the worst things that you can be labeled as. And yeah, they do use it as a pejorative, and they do use it
Yeah.
as one of those things that, if you're a person of color and you're not of the right mindset, or you say the
Right.
wrong thing, or, in your case, you put out the article and it's written in a certain way, then all of a sudden you're labeled, you're put in a box. And I talk a lot about that on the D-Rate the Hate podcast is,
Right.
people being labeled, people being put in a box, and
Right.
and
So,
they're just pulled out of the closet. And when it's convenient for whether it be the media or the politician or the whoever, taken out and put on a shelf when it's time for that person, because they've got that label on them,
right.
to be pandered to.
Yeah.
So
It's a kind of yeah, it's a gatekeeping sort of mechanism, right? You're not sufficiently black, or you are a race traitor because you hold this opinion and I think it's wrong. It's kind of, that's the kind of place that it's coming from, and then I quoted in the piece, Nicole Hannah-Jones had a tweet about, there's a difference between being racially black and politically black. So, you can kind of go all over the place with that, with interpreting that thing, right? But the basic argument there is that there is a black way to be political, right?
mm-hmm.
And there are black ideas. And if you don't have them, you can have all the melanin in the world, but you are not being sufficiently black to be considered, politically black, right?
Right.
And
Well, and I don't think there's any greater example than during the campaign, when I can't remember who it was that he was talking to, but when Joe Biden made the comment that if you're having any trouble, and I think you quoted that in the piece as well,
yeah, I
if
did.
you're having any trouble deciding who to vote for, then you're not black, as
Right.
if he has the authority on how to decide who's black and who's not.
Well, it's just a kind of, and the thing is, I try to do my best to have a charitable point of view with these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think Biden meant any harm. I think, and I don't think even Nicole Hannah-Jones means any harm necessarily. Like, I'm sure that she's convinced of what she's saying, and she has reasons for what she's saying. I just think that there are terrible side effects to these things, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what their intentions are, right? And I think that, someone like Nicole Hannah-Jones is probably much more deliberate in this sort of thing. I think it's easy for me to see what Joe Biden was trying to say there, which is just, more just political stuff of just like, listen, Donald Trump does not care about you if you are
Mm-hmm.
black, right? Like, if you don't understand that, then something is going on. Like, you must not even recognize yourself because it's so obvious to me, right? It's rhetoric.
Right.
So I can understand that. But the problem with that statement, in my opinion, even if I can, at least somewhat see what he's saying and kind of go with him in a certain direction with that, in terms of, Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody, right? I don't think he cares about anyone but himself. He's a singular object in the universe as far as he's concerned. That's how it appears to me. But
Okay.
but the problem is, there is an essentializing in that statement, right? Like, if you are black, quote unquote black, you must have this idea in your head, and that's a crazy thing to say.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Because you're taking an entire group of people, right? This racialized group of people, and we could talk about that concept later, but you're taking this entire group of people and you're saying, this is the opinion that you must hold because you have this color skin, because you have this ancestry, right? Which would be insane to do with literally anything else, right? It's,
Correct.
there are historical reasons why we group people this way, and why we feel that there's people kind of fuse together the racialization with a sense of community and like a kind of sense of ethnicity, right? There's a lot of complex stuff going on there. But the problem that I was trying to highlight in the piece is just, this is bullying, and it's gross.
Absolutely.
Right? And so in the piece, I pointed out a very stupid and innocuous example, but it goes to prove what the issue is, right? So I was filling out a form for a workshop, and it asked me my race. And instead of the multiple choice that usually I see, it had a blank field.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wrote human, because that's where my head is at. I've been slowly kind of progressing into this direction where I really just don't want to identify it with any race, and I don't want to reify the concepts.
And why
So,
should you? And why should you? I mean, I
right.
don't think it's relevant. I am much more the content of character versus color of skin kind of person, like Dr. King said in the
Sure.
past. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Me too. Right. But so, I noted this anecdote on Twitter, and people started mocking me for it. Right. Basically. And I quoted two particular people who had funny responses to it to me. One of them was like, the at the time my avatar on Twitter was just an illustration.
mhm.
So it wasn't immediately evident, right? But I mean, if you would have taken 2 clicks to just look at my profile, there was another photo. My banner photo was a photo of me. You would have seen what I look like.
Sure,
But
sure.
but this woman just assumed, and she just said, funny how we still know exactly what race this guy is, right?
Yeah,
Because the assumption is only a white guy would write that. That's the assumption. And someone else said something similar. A bunch of people said similar things, because it's inconceivable to them, at least, both of the women that I quoted, by the way, are quote unquote white. So it's even funnier, right?
sure, sure.
But but it's inconceivable to them that anybody racialized as black or brown would ever say such a thing, right? They couldn't possibly hold this idea in their head. So the assumption was perfectly safe as far as they were concerned that I was a white dude, right? And
Right.
they're obviously wrong. And that proves my point. And I called it the one thought rule, because it's, if you hold just a single thought that is against what they consider, the norm for your group, you are suddenly, your group membership gets called into question. You get your of color card, quote unquote, revoked.
Right. I mean, we see it all the time on social media. Whether I mean, and it
Right.
doesn't matter which platform you're talking about, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or whatever else out there. You see these keyboard warriors that they make assumptions, they jump to conclusions,
Yeah.
and
Right.
there's a lot of times that people. I don't think that they click into the profile. I don't think they look at the history of what a person's writing. I mean, a lot of times when I see something or I see somebody make a comment on something, if I feel the need to comment on something somebody says, generally I'm going to pop into their profile and try to
Mm.
get a little more of a backstory
Mm.
on who they are, what kind of stuff they comment upon, things like that before I make a comment,
Right.
because just like racism itself, in my opinion, is steeped in ignorance. A lot of the comments that you see on social media are steeped in ignorance, and I think that goes
Sure.
solidly to your point.
That was, yeah. So that was the impetus for the piece, and the point I was trying to make was twofold. It was kind of propelled by that particular, in group kind of gatekeeping, or one thought ruling. I just said, well, doing this is bullying and it's gross and we shouldn't do it. It's essentializing. It's really pretty disgusting to do. And also, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with race. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm refusing. I'm categorically just refusing it. I've become militantly not just anti-racist in the true sense of that word, but anti-race. Like, I'm done with
Yeah,
that. It's unicorns for me. I'm not entertaining nonsense anymore.
and I like it. I like that attitude. I like that mindset, Angel, because I think that's what we were supposed to be doing all along. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I think that's the vision of people like Dr. King, who did so much work for that back
Right.
before he was killed. But
Mhm.
today we see so much and almost everything. I mean, so quickly in whether it be social media or mainstream media or just journalism itself, we see that being the go-to thing, and that makes it hard for certainly hard for you in your profession, and me as somebody who I mean I know your overall goal, and I I found this out through reading some of your stuff, and especially on your website, angeleduardo.com. You're out to make the world a better place. And I love getting the opportunity on this podcast to talk to people who are doing just that. And yes, I do believe a colorblind or a race blind society is the best place that we can possibly be. But there are so many people who have that vested interest now in pushing race as a qualifier for everything. And one of the things and that another one of the pieces that you wrote recently, or I don't know exactly how recently, but you talked about critical race theory. And I mean, that's obviously a hot topic in the news nowadays. Kids are going back to school. Not only do we have all the masking nonsense and everything that goes along with COVID, but the school board meetings being just madhouses because of critical race theory. And anybody who opposes critical race theory is automatically labeled a hater or a white supremacist. And the people that are for it are automatically labeled as just the most militant. So talk a little bit about that article, Angel, if you would. Critical race theory and everybody being labeled, depending on what side of the topic you're on, you're automatically labeled as one extreme or the other, but it's not really that way, is it?
No, it isn't. I should say that, just backing up a little bit with the race thing, I reject race, but that doesn't mean ignoring racism, right? That doesn't mean that.
Oh yeah, of course.
And, being race blind is not even something that I think makes sense, because it's kind of presupposing the existence of a thing and then negating it, right? Whereas what I'm saying is that it's a nonsense concept. It doesn't exist. We conjure it into existence by the way we think and act. Like our belief in it is the thing that makes it appear real, even though it isn't.
Okay.
And there's this book called Racecraft by Barbara and Karen Fields, which I recently finished reading, and it profoundly moved me. And it's making this kind of argument. It's making us an analogy to witchcraft, right? Witches don't exist, but belief in witches exists. And witchcraft is kind of this thing we put on the world whenever we can't explain something. And it kind of has like a backwards effect of making it seem as though witches are real. So racecraft is a similar thing, right? So when we say, this man was shot because of the color of his skin, we're presupposing a difference based on the color of skin, existence of this sort of thing, right? So we're reifying it over and over again when we say, black people need to do X or get Y, or, white people need to do X, or like we're baking the problem back into the solution, even though we're trying to get out of it, we can't, because it's a fish doesn't know it's wet sort of phenomenon. Right. So
that's a phenomenal mindset. I've never heard it put that way.
Yeah.
And
it's tricky because
it is.
It's tricky because it's so foundational to so much of the way that we think and act and see one another. Like even in the civil rights movement, they're talking about black people, and they're talking about white people, and they're talking about, races, and they're saying these words, and they're using these concepts, and they're trying to fight against racism. Right. But they're inadvertently making race more and more real and more salient because of the way that they're engaging with the concept itself, right? And the analogy that I use, because of course the first thing people are gonna think or say is, oh, you're gonna pretend racism doesn't exist. You're gonna pretend that there's no inequality, and it's absolutely not that at all.
Sure, it's silly.
So, but there is a distinction that we need to make sure to make, right? Which is, I do not believe in race. Right? Race is nonsense, and I reject it, and I refuse to reify it and reinforce it as a concept. But I also acknowledge other people believe in race now, and other people believed in race before, and that belief led to behavior that has real life consequences. So even though race isn't real, racism is real.
Mm-hmm.
and the effects of racism is real.
Mm-hmm.
They're real, and we need to do something about that. So the analogy that I use is, with God, it's the same thing, right? I don't believe in God, but that doesn't mean that I don't think Christians exist, right? I know Christians exist. I know that belief in God exists, and I know that belief in God has shaped much of the world that I live in,
Mm-hmm.
and that some of those effects are still around, and they may or may not be, things that I'm going to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? So, but it doesn't mean religion doesn't exist. Religion exists, and
Mm-hmm.
religious people exist, and the effects of that exists, right? So if you're arguing about abortion, that's going to come into play, right? Because people have religious reasons for voting one way or the other, and things like that. So the manifestations of a belief are still real, even if the thing that's being believed is nonsense.
I
That's the
get it.
analogy I use. So yeah, so it's tricky, and
It's a profound mindset. I mean,
yeah.
it's definitely one that I've never encountered, and
Mm,
that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I get an
right.
opportunity to speak to people that it's not even something I would have guessed as a mindset, but now I know
Right.
it's out there, and I think it's very intriguing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And to getting into the critical race theory thing, there is important work to be done assessing our society and our systems for, remnants of bigotry based on the belief in race, right? Double standards based on, uh, presumed ancestry. And it makes sense to look at ourselves and look at previous behavior and look at the current situation of one group or another, and try to mitigate problems with it, right? But part of the problem is that even people who are kind of well versed in this sort of thing, they say it all the time. Race is a social construct, right? So they're acknowledging that it was a made up thing, right? But in the rest of their behavior and the rest of their actions, they kind of reify it. And I'm trying to take it one step further than just simply acknowledging that it is a fiction. I want to treat it as a fiction. So when I refer to it the way I would refer to leprechauns or unicorns, or, so there's a nonsense belief, but people believed in it, and now we have to deal with this problem, right? If I'm speaking about, I've already done it here, but if I'm speaking about racialized categories, racial categories, I try to put them in scare quotes. I try to separate myself at least one step from simply just accepting them as reality, from simply just saying you're a white person. I will say something to the effect of you are racialized as white, or you are quote unquote white, just to push back a little bit in the language, so that the concept is at least at the forefront of my mind. That I'm recognizing, okay, there's a program here that I have to manipulate. And that's something that not a lot of people do. Maybe they think there's no point. The thing that I'm always told is, well, you don't have to believe in race, but other people are going to they're going to make you black, whether you like it or not, right? They're going to see you this way, whether you
mm-hmm.
like it or
Mm-hmm.
not, right? But I mean, just because I don't have to conform to other people's perception of me, right? If,
Right, right.
if other people think that I'm Arab, which happens sometimes, right? People literally walk up to me and
Sure.
speak Arabic. I don't have to conform to that, right? There's no reason for me to want to conform to that. It doesn't matter if, someone is bigoted against Arabs and comes at me with their bigotry against Arabs. That doesn't make me Arab. They're still bigots, and what they're doing is still wrong, and I may have to defend myself. I may have to do something about that, right? But none of that means that suddenly I'm Arab and suddenly I have to internalize this and behave that way and accept it and label myself that way.
That
That's
was
a
a very good
small
point.
example. That's a small example. It's obviously much more complicated when you're talking about a society that has systematized this sort of thing in the
Sure.
past, and the remnants of it are still around. But the principle is still the same. Your self-conception doesn't have to conform to nonsense. It doesn't have to. And
No, that's right.
you can still deal with racism in whatever
Yep.
way you feel you need to, without
Yep.
accepting, the premise. I don't accept it.
Right.
Um,
No, and
but
I love the fact that you don't because, I talk about it a lot in this podcast, and I don't know how familiar you are with my work or whatever, but but I talk about it a lot, that victim mentality, and impressing upon kids the idea that just because of their color of their skin, they're automatically a victim is the biggest problem that I have. I mean, I know that there's more to critical race theory than that, but the idea that the portion of it, and I don't really need to get any further into it in my mind than the whole idea that, okay, just because you're a person of color, you're automatically a victim. That, just like you were talking about, well, they're going to make you black. Whether
Right.
you acknowledge the fact that you're black or not, they're going to make you black.
Right.
Or because my child is quote unquote, like you say, white, they're automatically an oppressor of some kind. And automatically they're a person of privilege. That's where I think a lot of people get very hung up on the critical race theory and stuff like that. And even if that wasn't the foundation of it, like you talk about in that article and whatever, it has definitely made it a toxic environment to tread. And I think that's where you talk about, you had made the quote or said the most frustrating aspect of the culture war is that it isn't real war at all. It's a conversation we are currently terrible at having, and we will continue to be terrible at it as long as we believe the war is real and our conflict is zero sum. If we want to create a fair and just world the way we say we do, we have to recognize that this is an idea that truly dooms us all. Talk about that quote from that article, Angel, and what is if it's not a war, and I don't know that it's a war or a culture war, but talk about what led you to write that, because I think that's a very profound statement in itself.
Well, thank you. It's something that I think about a lot, and it's part of my overall kind of mission, I guess you can call it. It's what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is kind of say, Mom, Dad, stop fighting, right? I'm kind of trying to do that thing. Because what I see is people failing to communicate with each other because they are being dishonest or refusing to extend compassion to the other, to understand where the other person is coming from. And the CRT is just the latest manifestation of this, right? So it's very complicated. There's a lot going on, right? CRT is a thing that exists. Critical race theory is a thing that exists. It's fairly obscure legal scholarship, right? People study it in law school mostly. And, Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and, Richard Delgado and these sorts of people, right? In the 70s and 80s. And it's ostensibly, it's meant to, kind of assess our systems and seek out white supremacy and, have a critical lens on our systems and structures and our society and how white supremacy, however they want to define that term, right? But, how that sort of thing manifests itself, right? But the thing is, it doesn't exist just in that little bubble anymore. It kind of seeped out into other areas, and it informs the mindsets and the ideologies and the ideas of many, many, many people now, different people with different agendas and different ideas and different things that they're trying to do. And so I make the analogy of kind of like, music television became MTV, and it slowly had less and less music in it, right? Just turned into like reality shows and game shows and whatever. Critical race theory has become CRT, and it has less and less of that scholarship in it, right? There's still a through line. There's still a connection there because you can trace a lot of this stuff back, right? And a lot of the people who are doing many of the things that people find alarming are actively, referring back to these things, whether they're misinterpreting them or not. There's a connection there, right? So they're going back and they're saying this, I'm trying to do this work. And it's based on some of this stuff, or at least it's based on their understanding of it. So there's a lot of complication there, right? But the conversation around it is even more disastrous because there's dishonesty on all sides of it, right? So I get accused of fence sitting and both siding all the time. I don't care, right? I'm just trying to make sense here. And if I see dishonesty, I don't care where it's coming from. I don't have a tribe. I don't have a side, right? I don't care. You can kick me out if you want. I don't care. all I want is to make sense. And the way I see it, as I mentioned in the other piece, the best part about not being in anybody's club or not being in any tribe is that now everybody's in mine, right? Because everyone belongs to me. I belong to them. They're all my brothers and sisters, and I care about all of them. So
Yeah.
I can disagree. I can fight you. I can argue. I can tell you you're dead wrong. I can think you're crazy. I can think you're dangerous, but you're still my brother, and I still want to do something and try to fix this and take care of you and make this work.
A better and more civil discourse. I mean, that's
right. So the CRT thing, on one side, there are people who are genuinely trying to fix what they see as a problem in the world. This rampant, despicable racism, this rampant oppression of groups of people, and they want to fix those things. The way that desire manifests sometimes is crazy. Sometimes it's misguided, right? But I understand that the impetus is this is what I'm trying to do. Now, sometimes those things get dangerous because there are, once by any means necessary, once that's on the table, many, many terrible things can happen. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
So, I think in the piece I said, something to the effect of what we're doing by communicating so poorly with one another is we are creating two completely fervent and idiotic sides that are just opposing one another forever. And we're not going to get anywhere. It's just a deadlock. It's a complete deadlock of discourse. And what we need is to stop, be honest, be humble, ask questions, try to understand, and connect, right? So I can try to connect with somebody who has these crazy ideas, right? And I don't have to agree with the ideas, but I can say, look, I understand what you're aiming for. I understand that you want justice. I understand that you want to root out what you call white supremacy. Now, I have some questions and I have some issues. Can we please dig down and work this out? Because I'm sure that for the most part, we're on the same side. What we're trying to do is build a world that is more just and more fair and where people can flourish. That's what most people, most of the time, are actually aiming for. That's why they care about anything at all. Some people have twisted ways of kind of manifesting those desires, right? And you have to correct those things. But that's what's going on. Everyone has this fundamental human desire to feel safe, to feel, secure, successful, and satisfied, right? These are things we want. So now we're getting into another piece that I wrote about Starman. And that's what it is. It's just trying to connect with the other side and connect with their humanity and try to understand where they're coming from, right? So if I disagree with you about abortion, right? If I just call you a monster, if I just call you, whether if you're against it, it's because you want to control women's bodies and you're just this oppressive misogynist, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're for it, you are a murderer of babies, right? That's not going to get us anywhere.
No, you dive into the realm of toxic rhetoric and hyperbole, and then automatically you're just shutting the other person down. Now they aren't even listening to what you're saying; they're just thinking about what they're going to say next.
Exactly, and we're making monsters of one another, right?
Oh yeah,
and the thing that happens when you do that, it's fine to kill monsters. That's the thing, right? You can destroy a monster. No one's going to say anything. Hey, I killed that monster. Oh, good, great. I'm glad we got rid of that monster, right?
Right.
That human being, I murdered that human being. That's a little tougher, right?
It's a different story. It's a different animal altogether. Right. That's one of the reasons, and I believe you've been involved with, or I know at some point because I saw a video with the two of you together, Monica Guzman from Braver Angels. One of the you're familiar with the Braver Angels organization, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons I became involved with them is because they are looking for that more civil discourse. How do we have that conversation in a civil way, without demonizing the other side, because you're right. Once it comes down to the toxic rhetoric, the demonization, the making that other side a monster, who's gonna have a conversation with a monster? We're not there to listen to monsters. We're there to kill monsters.
Exactly.
And I like the way that you put that, Angel. So you've brought a lot to the table today, and I love that mindset that it goes a long way to the concept that one of my favorite talk show hosts, he always talks about clarity over agreement. We don't necessarily have to agree on everything, But if
Right.
we can make our point clearly and intelligently and maybe teach somebody on the other side a little bit about us, we can start to see each other on that human being level again,
Yeah.
instead of seeing each other as monsters. You and I having this conversation today, I'm fairly certain that on political grounds, we probably don't agree on a whole lot. On human grounds, I think we agree on a whole lot.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell that you're a genuinely good person, a great hearted person, you know, but you and I, we're not going to agree on religion. We're probably not going to agree on politics, but as a human being,
Right.
you know, and I don't care about your political leaning in having this conversation. I agree, and I contacted you because I could genuinely tell by your writing and your website, which your website is awesome, by the way. I really dig
Thank you.
your music, and the well, we can talk about that in a minute. But the fact that you're a person out there, a human being that's trying to better the world,
Yeah.
that's all I needed to know to want you on the podcast. You know,
Um,
we're all about bettering the world one attitude at a time, because
Yeah.
every individual is responsible for making their life better and then making the world better in turn. I
right.
can tell that you're doing that, and it's awesome.
Well, thank you.
I would love for more people to read your stuff and get an opportunity to, you know, go to your media page and check out some of the videos, you know, where you've interacted with others, because it's incredibly important stuff. Like I said, it's a profound thought process that you have. Like I said, it's very, very cool, and I'm digging it. Let's
I
talk.
appreciate it.
Let's just jump off that for a minute. I want to talk about your website a little bit. So you're a photographer, you're a musician, you're a writer. Hell, I'd put you in the class of a philosopher in some in some ways. But
I
talk a
know
little bit about that.
philosophers who might be mad about that.
Yeah, well, talk a little bit about that progressive funk music you've got on your page. Yeah, I didn't listen to a lot of it, but the stuff I did listen to, I was really digging. And just tell me a little bit about, you know, Angel Eduardo and your music.
Yeah. Well, that band has been defunct for a few years now, but it was a 7-piece kind of mutant of, you know, kind of Stevie Wonder meets Led Zeppelin kind of thing. We had a horn section, and it was meant to be, you know, ostensibly the idea was a funk band, but of course we're going to start throwing in all the other stuff that we like. We like heavy metal and rock and roll music, and we love, you know, dance music and all kinds of stuff. So it has a wide sort of range of sounds, and we kind of fuse it all together. And there's odd meters, you know, like instead of a song being in 4, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's in 7 or 9. Sometimes it's in 5 and then 7 and then 9, you know. It was all crazy experimental, you know, very heavily influenced by 70s prog rock and Stevie Wonder and all that sort of stuff. We were called Blue Food, based on that George Carlin bit about how there's no blue food. And, you know, don't say blueberries because they're purple.
Sure.
That's the bit. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. It was a beautiful band, and we had this amazing sound that I was so proud of and so happy with, and it was so much fun to play out. But eventually it just became too unwieldy. It was, you know, herding cats with 7 people. It was a difficult process. And eventually, you know, it didn't work out, but we have some music that I'm really proud of. It's on the website there, and you can check it out. And I'm working on, I'm in another band right now. We're working on some other stuff, and, you know, eventually I'll have some solo material out at some point. I keep putting it off, but eventually I will record some solo material that's more, it's very important to me for all my projects to sound different. One of my pet peeves is when a side project or solo project of some band or artist sounds just like the other one. Like, what was the point then? You know, you just wanted the paycheck to not be split. Like, I don't understand. So, all my stuff sounds really, really different. This new band is a totally different animal. And my solo stuff is also a totally different thing. It's much more singer-songwriter-y, Jeff Buckley kind of stuff. But yeah, it's, you know, it's great. People ask me all the time about, you know, what my process is like between writing and photography and music and all that stuff. And I always tell them it's the same process, because it's all storytelling, right? A song is a story. You know, a sculpture is a story. A photograph is a story. I'm trying to guide you through an experience. one way or the other. And it's all about presentation. It's all about how am I laying it out for you? It's, it's all that beautiful stuff. So I'm working it in different ways, but it's a similar kind of approach.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, man. I like I said, I getting to know you a little bit through your website, and then obviously having the opportunity to speak with you, Angel, has been a real pleasure for me. And I dig what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much.
Like I said, I encourage everybody to check out your site and the works that you're doing, whether it be your photography, your music, or most of all your writing, because I think there's a lot of important things going on in your articles, and they really need to check them out. So obviously angeleduardo.com, be able to catch that at the show notes. And anything else that you want to leave the DTH listeners with, Angel?
Yeah. Well, I guess just for clarification, or at least just for more pointed, a kind of more pointed idea, my whole approach is this, and I think that it would benefit everybody if we all adopted this. Can you articulate your opponent's position in a way that they would agree with, right? So when you're done saying it, can you get them to say, yes, that's exactly what I mean? Or better yet, can you get them to say, you know what, that's even better than the way that I put it, right? And can you, beyond that, can you connect with the values or the belief systems, the fundamental values, the human desires, the goals that are undergirding that person's point of view, right? Like, why do they care about this? Why does this matter to them? What larger purpose is this point of view serving? Can you connect with that? If you can, you're far further along on the road to persuasion and connection and understanding and learning for yourself, because you're not always right. Nobody's always right. You might be wrong. You got to go in curious. You got to go in wondering, okay, let me try to understand this other person because I might be missing something. Or at the very least, let me try to understand them so that I can understand why people like this are wrong, right? So either way, but if you can do that, you're in good shape. If you can't do that, the likelihood that you're misunderstanding is extremely high.
Yep.
And the likelihood of persuading them or effectively opposing them is extremely low. So either way, it is to your benefit to attempt to do this. And that's steel manning and then star manning. It's try your best to actually understand and internalize their position. You don't have to agree. You just have to understand it. You have to be able to show the math, right? And then connect with the humanity of it. Why does this human being care about this? Why does this human being think this way? What is informing this idea? And then you're no longer talking to a monster. You are now speaking to a human being. And compassion will just be inevitable at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, just like Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So you put it very well. I don't think anybody could argue at that point unless they don't want to understand. So very good, Angel. I very much appreciate your time, and thank you for joining the Derate the Hate podcast. And I think there was a lot of good in here that a lot of people get a lot out of. So keep bettering the world the way that you are, and hope to talk to you again, man.
I am doing my best. Thank you very much.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.